Hey everybody, this is Chris Francis with Church Film School. Thanks for joining me today. In today's episode, I am going to break down my go-to lighting setup that I use for almost every single on-camera host that's talking directly to camera. And I'll give you a hint, I'm using it right now. Beautiful lighting, right? So let's dive in and I'll show you how I did it. Alright, so the first thing we did here was a little trick I like to do sometimes when I'm recording 4K on camera host, especially if I don't have a lot of B-roll, is just to kind of open up with a little digital zoom just to make it a little bit more visually interesting. Throw that 4K footage on a 1080 timeline, set a couple of keyframes, and boom, you got yourself a zoom lens. So after that sweet zoom, let's talk about the background set design and work our way forward on the camera. So for this particular video, we were filming the pastor in the lobby of the offices. And the first thing that I want to talk about is the lights in the background. So with the lights in the background, we used them for two purposes. We used them to highlight areas of the background to make it more visually interesting. And then we also used some of the lights as just practicals to be featured in the video, like these over here. So the first thing we did is we tried to replace all these bulbs. I actually think these are IKEA lamps, and they have those like really terrible LED bulbs like right here. So the first thing we did is we took those out and replaced any light that was going to be seen. We replaced that with just an old tungsten bulb. And then what we did is we put a dimmer just off camera down here so we could dim the lights down low so it wasn't like glowing nuclear completely, just like overexposed. And then what we also did, if you'll notice, kind of like the halation, just kind of the soft glow that we're getting from these lights right here. We were able to do that by putting Black Pro Mist filter on the lens. And I've got a couple of these. The one I use the most often is this one. It's the 1/8 filter. When you do that, it is a very subtle effect. Basically what it does is it lowers the contrast in the frame. So it kind of softens up some of the skin tones there, some of the imperfections on people's skins, which is a nice thing to do. But what it also does, if there's any direct light hitting the lens, basically it causes this effect here where there's just like a really soft, gentle glow to it. It kind of makes it look like old film. So that's a pretty fun tool to have in your arsenal. These are the cheaper screw-on type. It's $85. You can get the bigger, more expensive ones that go inside of a matte box. But I don't own a matte box, so I think I've got 77mm, and you can just get step-up rings or step-down rings to fit the rest of your lenses, depending on how big they are. But yeah, that's basically how we created the look here. The only other thing I wanted to point out is that we were pretty intentional with getting some light hitting the background here, just so it's a little bit brighter than his dark hair, just to provide a little bit more separation between him and the background. And then I believe we also used this light here, or there was another one just out of frame, as a practical source to just give him just a little bit of edge here to help him pop a little bit, just make it look a little bit nicer. So the next thing I want to talk about is the key light that we used. This was basically our lighting setup here. You can see the quiet please, very official tape. Not the best idea to shoot in the middle of the office lobby because it was pretty loud, but we had good crowd control, so it ended up working out well. Well, right here is where we had our camera and our teleprompter. If you guys don't work with teleprompters, I'd highly recommend testing it out with your pastor, see if he can get comfortable with it, because if he can or she can, it just makes life so much easier. We just put the script on the iPad. We're using my favorite iPad teleprompter app called Prompt Smart Pro, which I'll link to in the description. But what I love about this teleprompter app is that it's actually voice activated. So as the pastor on the on-camera host goes through the script, it'll automatically scroll the text up. And I'd say it works pretty well. Every once in a while you get a hiccup, but not more often than you would if you just had somebody operating it. So anyways, let's hop back into the lighting. So this is kind of our setup here, and as you can see, we just have a key light over here to the left, and we have no fill light over here. I know like in college and a lot of courses, they try to teach you 3-point lighting and say you should have a key source here and a fill source here and then like a backlight here. But to be honest, for most of my shoots, I only bring a single source key over here on one side, and then if anything, we'll just use ambient or practicals in the background to kind of fill out the rest. But the reason I don't use fill light a lot of times is because I use such a big soft source coming from the side that it wraps really well around the talent. So as you can see here, we're getting light. It's all coming here pretty evenly from this source just off camera over here. But because it's so big and it's so soft, it's actually wrapping around his face. So you can see over here is a little bit darker on this side, but not a ton. And that's literally just the big soft source wrapping around here. There's no other light coming from over here lighting him from this side. So another thing that I did with my lights here is that I double diffused them. I think these are Dracast lights. They're like LED equivalents of 1K lights, and that's just what the church had, so that's what we used. But if we go on this view here, you'll see right here we've got a quarter stop of silk diffusion inside of a scrim gem. But you'll see we've got one of the 1Ks here in a softbox. So it's being diffused once right here, and that's a quarter stop silk as well. And then it's diffusing the light, spreading it before it hits here. So it's getting softer here. One, it's already a little soft because it's an LED Fresnel and not a tungsten Fresnel, but it's getting softened here. And then it's spreading out more, it's getting softened again, and then it's traveling pretty far, like a good 6-7 feet before it's hitting our talent here, Pastor Miles. And the result of that is that it's just this really nice big soft source that just kind of almost evenly lights him, but there's still a little bit of shape here, but it has a nice natural look to it. So if we look back here, this was diffused here, but we had another one here, and I think this was probably because I couldn't find another softbox, but we had this light here, which was just an open face 1K LED. So I put a second quarter silk diffusion from our smaller scrim gem set here. So it's going through 2 layers of diffusion, and on this I probably spotted it a little bit too, because what I wanted to do was I wanted his face to be just a little bit brighter than the rest of his body here. It looks pretty even, so it's a pretty subtle effect, but whenever possible I try to get the face of somebody to be just a little bit brighter than the rest of the frame to kind of help direct the viewer's attention to the face. Sometimes when you're doing these really big soft sources of light, one of the drawbacks is that the person's legs or arms here will be just as bright or brighter than anything else. So whenever I do that, if I can, I try to get a little more light here. This is something you could obviously do in post as well. You could do a little power window and change the exposure just a little bit on the face to draw a little more attention, but whenever possible I try to do that in camera. One other nice thing about having such a big soft source, this is probably like 6 feet by 6 feet or so, is it allows me to light almost from the side. So if the camera's here, this light here is coming almost from the side. I think a mistake that a lot of filmmakers make, and I made this mistake too, is you say, okay, here's my person, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a light shining almost behind the camera, like almost like I'm going to put a light like right here above the camera to shine at my talent. And what that's going to do is that's going to create a really flat image, but it's also going to give you a lot of problems with glasses. If you do what I'm doing here, which is a big soft light from the side here, and it's coming from the side, what that really will do is help when you're filming somebody with glasses. You'll see that in both eyes actually there's a catch light, and both eyes you're getting the twinkle here and a twinkle there, but there's absolutely no glare in his glasses at all, which if you've ever tried to film anybody with glasses, you know how big of a pain in the butt that can be when you're getting that glare. So that's another perk of doing a really big soft source coming in from the side, is that it's so big that his eyes will catch just a little bit of it, but his glasses won't. So here's another little look here. We've got the teleprompter, and this is on the Canon C200. We're shooting 4K RAW. Looks like we have my small HD 702 bright on set with us, and then we also had my Teradek wireless receiver, which was going to be sending a signal to our client monitor here, which was just a random TV that was laying around the office. So gear-wise, I think that's got us pretty much covered. Then the only other thing I want to note is that in editing, we're shooting Canon C200 RAW. So I just put a LUT on there, which is the ones that comes from Canon's website. It's a free download. For pretty much anything that I shoot in Canon RAW, my starting point is pretty much always the Cinema Gamut Canon Log 3 to BT709 YDR look. That's typically what I start with, and then a lot of times I'll boost exposure a little bit and boost the saturation a little bit. The only other thing that I did to these clips is that I also sharpened it by 15%. When you shoot compressed on the C200, that automatically does noise reduction and sharpening in camera, but when you're shooting RAW, you're just getting a truly raw image. So you kind of have to do a little bit more tweaking to it in post, but you can get a really nice look there that I really like from the camera. And then I think the only other thing that I wanted to note, and this has saved my butt a lot of times. So this promo, if you watched it, it's roughly 2.5 minutes long, and it's pretty much just a pastor on screen talking. We had a little bit of motion graphics in here, but one thing that can really spice things up just a little bit is just adding some stock videos just to add a little bit of life. So these stock clips here were from my Film Pack subscription. I just went on there. They have a whole bunch of video portraits. So I just grabbed a couple of those. This whole piece was on diversity, so it was pretty easy to find a bunch of diverse video portraits, and I'll link to Film Pack as well. I use them on almost every church video I do just because they have such great stock clips to just supplement the projects that I'm doing. And it comes really in handy when you're doing church videos and you're light on budget and you just need a couple of clips, slices of life. And I personally have the unlimited annual subscription. So anytime I'm doing a church video, especially if the budget is lower, and let's say they have just enough money for me to come out and film their pastor, get the teleprompter, the lights, everything looking top notch, but they don't have money on the budget for me to go out and shoot B-roll for upcoming promo or an event or whatever. A lot of times what I will do is I will come to Film Pack and I will look at their categories, and they have so much stuff that they keep adding, where it's like all sorts of stuff like family, lifestyle. They've got some abstract stuff that's always good for sermon bumpers, etc. But they even have a religion section, so they've got a lot of footage of people praying, reading the Bible, worshiping, that kind of thing. So definitely check those guys out if you haven't, and use the coupon code CHURCH, CHURCH, and you'll get a pretty fat discount there on any of their products. All right, so that wraps it up for today's episode. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. I would be more than happy to answer them if I know the answers. And in the meantime, if you haven't, subscribe to the channel right here.